Beneath the frost-laced moon, a boy's silence echoed like the howl of windswept pines, carrying the weight of unspoken grief across the frozen valleys. Ilara Voss had always navigated the shadowed fringes of Eldridge Pack like a ghost in her own life, her human heritage a perpetual shadow that no act of devotion could dispel. Born from a brief, forbidden liaison between a nomadic scholar from the lowlands and a fierce she-wolf who slipped away into the mist-shrouded dawn shortly after her birth, Ilara was raised in the Pack's outer reaches, where the scent of pine and earth mingled with the faint, acrid tang of exclusion. She had carved out a purpose in the crumbling stone schoolhouse on the Pack's edge, its walls etched with ancient runes that spoke of lunar prophecies and alpha lineages, teaching the young wolves the delicate art of letters and lore. The air there was always thick with the musty aroma of aged parchment and the crisp bite of mountain air seeping through cracks, a sanctuary where she poured her outsider's wisdom into eager, if wary minds. The Pack held their alpha king, Thorn Blackwood, in a reverence bordering on myth, a colossal figure whose broad shoulders bore the scars of countless border defenses, his once vibrant amber eyes now dulled by layers of regret and unyielding duty. He ruled from the great hall of Blackwood Keep, a fortress of jagged granite and ice-veined spires that pierced the perpetual twilight skies, where torches flickered eternally against the encroaching cold. But it was Thorn's son, Kai, who occupied Ilara's quiet thoughts like a persistent winter fog. At 12 winters old, the boy was the rightful heir, his dark curls and sharp features a mirror of his father's prime. Yet his voice had abandoned him 3 years earlier, on the blood-soaked night when his mother, the gentle Luna Eloan, fell in a brutal skirmish with the encroaching Ironfang rivals. Kai's muteness was no mere childish whim. It was a profound fracture, a soul-deep wound that the Pack's healers could neither mend nor explain, leaving him adrift in a world that demanded roars from its future king. The rejection descended upon Ilara like an avalanche, swift and merciless, under the watchful gaze of a blood moon that painted the snow in crimson hues. The elders convened in the central clearing, their silvered fur bristling in the chill wind that whipped through the pines, their breaths forming spectral clouds as they pronounced their verdict. "A human taint cannot nurture the blood of kings," Elder Garrick growled, his voice gravelly with age and prejudice, his yellowed fangs glinting in the firelight. They pointed to Kai's enduring silence as irrefutable evidence, a curse woven into the boy's spirit by Ilara's foreign whispers and soft-hearted ways, which they deemed unfit for the raw, instinctual world of wolves. The Pack's howls rose in agreement, a cacophony that vibrated through Ilara's bones, sealing her fate with the finality of a slammed iron gate. Banished to the wild fringes where the dense forest surrendered to the unforgiving jagged mountains, Ilara gathered her scant possessions with trembling hands. A threadbare woolen cloak frayed at the hems from years of mending, a precarious stack of yellowed books bound in cracked leather that held tales of ancient pathfinders and forgotten magics, and most precious of all, a single silver locket inherited from her vanished mother. The locket dangled from a fine chain, its surface intricately etched with a crescent moon that seemed to capture the very essence of lunar mystery, warm against her skin even as the biting wind clawed at her exposed cheeks. It had been her mother's sole remnant, a talisman whispered to hold the spark of Omega gifts long diluted in human lines. And now it felt like the last thread tethering Ilara to any sense of belonging. She set out at dawn, her boots crunching through the deepening snowdrifts that blanketed the path like a shroud, each step a laborious pull against the earth's reluctant grip. The wind howled in her ears, carrying the faint, fading chorus of the Pack's judgmental calls, twisting like a knife in her chest and forcing hot tears to freeze on her lashes. What was true strength, she pondered in the solitude of her march, if not the quiet endurance of isolation's merciless freeze, the kind that seeped into bones and challenged the spirit's fragile fire? The mountains rose before her like ancient sentinels, their peaks eternally capped in glittering ice that reflected the pale sun in blinding shards, offering the illusion of solitude's peace, but promising no quarter to the weary. As the forest thinned and the air grew thinner still, Ilara pressed the locket to her lips, its subtle hum a faint reassurance amid the vast, indifferent wilderness. In this exile, she realized with a pang, some silences concealed wounds far deeper than any words could ever hope to heal, and hers was just beginning to bleed. The cave's jagged mouth yawned wide against the mountainside, exhaling gusts laden with the sharp resin of ancient pines and the elusive smoke of far-off wildfires, as if the earth itself mourned the intruder's approach. Ilara had stumbled upon this hidden refuge as the blizzard unleashed its full fury, a maelstrom of white that blurred the line between sky and ground, forcing her to claw her way through drifts that rose to her waist. Inside, the cave's depths offered a grudging shelter, its walls slick with perpetual dampness and veined with quartz that caught stray glimmers of light like trapped stars. Days melted into indistinguishable nights in this frozen limbo, where she survived on sips of melted snow and scraps of foraged roots, her body aching from the unrelenting cold that seeped through her cloak like spectral fingers. To stave off despair, Ilara scratched rudimentary lessons into the frost-crusted floor with a sharpened stick, passages from her books on celestial navigations and the moon goddess's edicts, reminders of realms beyond the pack's ironclad hierarchies. Yet it was the loneliness that gnawed deepest, a hollow ache echoing the sting of her banishment, amplifying every distant crack of ice or whisper of wind into omens of doom. The silver locket, nestled against her collarbone, became her sole companion. She pressed it to her lips in the dim hours, feeling its faint, rhythmic hum as if it murmured the goddess's secrets to outcasts, a subtle warmth defying the cavern's chill. Then, on a twilight, when the storm's rage softened to a mournful wail, a shadow materialized at the cave's threshold, coalescing from the swirling snow like an apparition born of legend. It was Kai Blackwood, the Alpha King's forsaken son, his slight frame swallowed by a tattered fur cloak mended with crude stitches, his silver-gray eyes wide with a primal fear that sliced through Ilara's guarded heart. No words bridged the space between them. His silence remained an impenetrable fortress, forged in the crucible of grief that had claimed his mother and left him adrift. But an instinct older than reason drew her forward, curiosity blooming amid the caution like a fragile shoot through permafrost. Why had the prince ventured here, alone and vulnerable, abandoning the gilded safety of Blackwood Keep for this forsaken wild? Was it rebellion against his father's distant rule, or something more desperate? A flight from the pack's suffocating expectations? With hesitant movements, Ilara extended a strip of her last dried meat, preserved from a hare snared weeks earlier, her hand quivering not solely from the cold, but from the charged tension humming in the air between them. Kai recoiled initially, his body tensing like a cornered fawn, fear flickering in those luminous depths, eyes the color of moonlight striking forged steel, haunted by the ghosts of loss. Thorne's unspoken guilt over Alawan's death had transformed the king from a passionate guardian to a stoic enforcer of duty, his affections armored against further pain, and Kai bore the invisible scars of that emotional exile, a boy burdened by a legacy he could neither voice nor escape. Yet, as the blizzard battered the rocks with renewed vigor, sending tremors through the cave's floor, Kai edged closer inch by inch, compelled by the same enigmatic thread that now tugged at Ilara's core. She kindled a small fire from scavenged twigs and flint, its flames leaping to life with a soft crackle that filled the space with the comforting scent of smoldering wood. In that wavering glow, Ilara traced a reverent finger over the locket's etched crescent, watching it capture the firelight in prismatic flecks. For the first time, in Kai's unblinking gaze, she glimpsed not the sting of rejection, but a raw, silent entreaty, a curiosity forged in the fires of mutual isolation, hinting at bonds yet to be named. Fire danced erratically in the cavern's shadowed heart, its golden tongues casting elongated, wavering shadows that seemed to whisper warnings of perils lurking just beyond the unyielding stone walls, where the world outside remained a frozen tumult. The fragile truce between Ilara and Kai had woven itself through the intervening days, a tapestry of unspoken gestures and shared silences that warded off the encroaching void. She taught him in the fire's warmth, etching maps and runes into the softened earth with a charred stick, her voice a gentle cadence recounting tales of ancient pathfinders who navigated not just lands, but the labyrinths of the soul. Kai absorbed it all without a sound, his responses manifesting in evolving sketches, crude at first, then blooming into detailed renderings of the encircling mountains, as though her narrative stirred some latent fire within him. The silver locket evolved into their shared talisman. One evening, as embers popped softly, Ilara allowed him to trace its cool surface, his small fingers lingering with a reverence that sent a shiver through her, as if the crescent moon unlocked a buried ember in his chest, warming the chill of his muteness. But sanctuary shattered with the thaw's insidious creep when the first trickles of meltwater carved paths through the snow, heralding the arrival of the Iron Fang scouts. These intruders slunk through the narrow passes like wraiths, their pelts dusted with frost and eyes gleaming with predatory hunger for the Blackwood throne, driven by rumors of the Alpha King's weakening resolve. Their approach was heralded by guttural snarls that echoed like distant thunder rolling through the valleys, vibrating the cave's walls and spiking Ilara's pulse. Seizing Kai's arm, she drew him deeper into the labyrinthine tunnels, their footsteps muffled by the drip of melting ice, her heart thundering in sync with his shallow, ragged breaths. They crouched behind a shimmering veil of icicles, the air thick with the metallic scent of fear sweat and the intruder's musky intrusion. The scouts' torches pierced the gloom, their flames sputtering against the damp stone and illuminating a band of hardened betas, fur matted with the crusted blood of prior conquests, led by a hulking figure whose face bore a jagged scar twisting his muzzle into a perpetual sneer. "The cursed prince skulks with a human filth," he spat, his voice a venomous rasp that bounced off the walls, his claws scraping sparks from the rock as he prowled. "Thorn's bloodline ends in weakness. We'll drag the whelp back in pieces." Empathy surged through Ilara like a tide in that moment of terror. She saw Kai not as the distant heir of legend, but as a vulnerable child yearning for the shield of protection she herself had long craved, his small form pressing against hers for the first time without reservation. He gripped her hand with desperate strength, his palms slick with sweat, transmuting the raw edge of fear into a nascent bond hammered in the forge of mutual survival. The scouts' search grew frenzied, their boots crunching over loose stones, but the cave's treacherous twists, narrow fissures and sudden drops veiled by shadow, foiled them, forcing a cursing retreat into the lingering storm. As silence reclaimed the space, Ilara coaxed a fresh blaze to life, its heat blooming like a hesitant dawn. In the renewed glow, Kai's gaze met hers across the flames, a spark of nascent trust igniting in those silver depths, mirroring the locket's subtle pulse against her skin. Their refuge, born of necessity, now thrummed with possibility, yet the encroaching dangers painted their sanctuary in strokes of perilous fragility, a fleeting haven under the moon's indifferent watch. And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from, and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel, and at what moments of the night they find you. Moonlight pierced the cavern's ceiling through a narrow fissure like a divine lance, bathing the silver locket in an ethereal silver glow, as if the moon goddess herself descended to stir its long-dormant secrets into wakeful life. Weeks unfurled in their secluded enclave like the slow unraveling of a tightly wound scroll, each day layering new depths onto the bond between Ilara and Kai. She delved deeper into the locket's inherited lore, reciting by firelight the sagas of pathfinders, legendary omegas whose veiled gifts illuminated hidden trails through both physical wilds and the tangled thickets of destiny. Kai drank in these narratives with rapt silence, his once stilted drawings transforming into visionary maps that charted not just the mountain's contours, but ethereal paths woven with lunar symbols, as if her words had kindled a spark long smothered in his grief-stricken soul. Their connection deepened organically, her empathy serving as a sturdy bridge spanning the chasm of his muteness. Yet Ilara resisted labeling it as anything beyond survival's camaraderie. Love's tentative murmur felt too hazardous a flame in the tinderbox of their exile, liable to consume them both. It was during a midnight vigil, as the distant howls of patrolling wolves wove a haunting lullaby through the night, that the locket ignited its hidden power. Ilara sat cross-legged by the fire's dying embers, the metal warming unnaturally against her skin, when a sudden vertigo seized her. Her vision fractured and reformed in a cascade of crystalline images. The opulent halls of Blackwood Keep, alive with scheming whispers. Thorne's throne room shrouded in deceit, where a sly advisor with eyes like polished obsidian conspired with Ironfang emissaries, plotting the king's downfall through poisoned alliances and forged decrees. The revelation crashed over her like a glacial torrent. Her latent gift, a pathfinder's sight inherited through her mother's Omega lineage and muted by her human blood, erupted in a blaze of icy luminescence, the locket's crescent pulsing in rhythm with her racing heart. She gasped, the air tasting of ozone and revelation, her fingers clenching the chain as the visions receded, leaving her breathless and trembling. Kai, roused from his watchful doze, scrambled to her side, his hand on her arm conveying urgent concern through touch alone, his eyes searching hers with the intensity that bordered on accusation. In that suspended instant, amid the cave's echoing silence, he comprehended the truth she had only begun to grasp. She was no ordinary exiled teacher, but the pivotal key to unraveling his father's entangled fate, the unforeseen redeemer destined to cleanse a throne befouled by layers of guilt and betrayal. The weight of this awakening settled between them, dense as the snow blanketing the world outside, forging their paths into an inexorable knot beneath the moon's luminous scrutiny. What hidden strengths lay coiled in outcasts, waiting for the goddess's call to uncoil? The relentless wind bore the faint, insistent clamor of the pack's war horns from the valleys far below, summoning spectral echoes of battles long scarred into the land's frozen memory. Ilara's visions surged with increasing fervor, dragging her unwillingly into the labyrinth of Thorne's buried torments. The fateful night when Kai's mother, Elowyn, had been torn from them in a savage border clash, her life's blood seeping into the pristine snow as Thorne, torn between paternal fury and alpha imperatives, chose the grim calculus of duty over the reckless pursuit of her slayers. That pivotal hesitation had not only widowed the king, but had sealed Kai's voice in a vault of trauma, a festering injury akin to an untreated wound that poisoned the spirit. Now, with the Ironfang threat coiling tighter like a serpent in the underbrush, Ilara and Kai abandoned their cavernous haven, the locket serving as their celestial compass, its glow illuminating concealed trails that snaked through sheer cliffs and veiled ravines where the air grew sharp with the scent of exposed stone and wild thyme. Their descent unfolded under a bruised sky, Kai's hand clasped in hers, feeling like a solemn vow etched in flesh, his enduring silence now a bulwark against the tempests of uncertainty brewing ahead. They crested the pack's territorial threshold at the hush of dusk, the tree line giving way to the familiar sprawl of Eldridge lands, where torchlit silhouettes patrolled the borders. Thorne awaited them in the shadow of Blackwood Keep's looming gates, his immense form a silhouette of raw power etched against the blaze of the great hall's hearths, his fur rippling in the evening breeze that carried the mingled aromas of roasting venison and oiled leather. The reunion erupted into confrontation with volcanic force. The elders encircled them, their voices a torrent of accusation, pelts bristling as they decried Ilara's sorcery and human impurity. The advisor, his features twisted in feigned outrage, seized the moment to advocate her execution, his words dripping with the poison her visions had unveiled. Kai stepped forward into the fray, his slender body quaking yet resolute, lips parting in a futile bid for speech that yielded only a strangled breath. Thorne's gaze, shadowed by the ghosts of loss and the relentless grind of leadership, wavered between paternal longing and regal skepticism, the air thick with the unspoken plea for redemption. Ilara stood unyielding at the circle's edge, the locket a heavy anchor at her throat, its crescent catching the dying light as she demanded truth's unvarnished light over the pack's ossified traditions. The moral precipice yawned before them, Would the king summon the compassion to liberate his son from silence's tyrannical hold? Or would he cling to the glacial certainty of power, dooming them to isolation's repeat? As the rival pack's howls sliced through the encroaching night like sharpened blades, the scales of choice balanced on oblivion's razor. Forgiveness as the path to healing, or war's inferno to consume the fragile threads of hope. The air hung heavy with the coppery tang of fresh spilled blood, intertwining with the ozone promise of rain, lashing the frozen earth as if the heavens themselves wept for the carnage about to unfold. The skirmish ignited in the moon-drenched clearing beyond the keep, where ancient oaks stood as silent witnesses, their branches clawing at the starlit canopy. Iron Fang warriors burst from the tree line in a whirlwind of snarls and flashing fangs, their assault a meticulously orchestrated bid for the throne, eyes burning with the fervor of the disenfranchised. Thorn met them like an unleashed storm, his thunderous roars reverberating through the pines as he tore into the fray, claws rending fur and sinew with the precision of a blade forged in vendetta. Yet treachery struck from within. The advisor's concealed dagger found its lethal arc, slicing a deep gash across the king's flank, crimson rivulets blooming vivid against his pristine white pelt, the metallic scent flooding Ilara's nostrils as she fought to shield Kai. Guided by the locket's fervent glow, Ilara's pathfinder sight pierced the chaos, unveiling the trajectories of lunging foes before their shadows even fell. A beta's pounce evaded with a desperate sidestep, a hidden archer's bolt deflected by a hurled branch. Kai, no longer a mere observer, surged into the melee at her flank, his newfound agility a testament to their shared trials, shoving her clear of a fatal swipe that would have ended her in an instant. His lips parted in a raw, voiceless cry that thrummed through her like a seismic wave, a prelude to the fracture of his silence. As the Iron Fang forces reeled back, battered and baying vows of retribution into the night, the pack's focus turned inward, the clearing littered with the wounded and the fallen, their labored breaths mingling with the patter of gathering rain. Thorn, slumped against a bloodied trunk, his wound hastily stanched but his essence laid bare, confronted the specters of his history, the paralyzing guilt that had muted his son, the reflexive rejection of Ilara's ilk that echoed his own suppressed shame over Eloan's demise. Ilara approached through the haze, the locket aglow with an inner fire, laying bare her gift, not merely a seer's eye, but a healer's touch that mended the invisible fractures of the spirit, drawing forth confessions long entombed. Kai, his gaze fixed on his father with piercing clarity, at last shattered the barrier. A single word escaped his throat, fragile yet seismic. Mother. It hung in the air like a thunderclap, precipitating a moral cataclysm that forced Thorn to his knees. In that crucible, the king elected mercy's arduous path, exiling the treacherous advisor to the border wilds and extending an olive branch to the human whose quiet grace had orchestrated their salvation. The pack's murmurs shifted from hostility to hesitant awe, the rain washing away the blood stains as bonds reformed. Yet the toll of such clemency lingered like a shadow at dawn. Freedom's gift came laced with the whisper of greater sacrifices, as love's true trial loomed on the horizon, demanding everything in exchange for rebirth. Like if you believe rejection can become destiny. Torchlight wavered and danced across the great hall's towering icy walls, which rose like frozen sentinels etched with the faint, swirling patterns of ancient frost, illuminating a mosaic of faces carved deep with the raw etchings of doubt, tentative hope, and the lingering, acrid bite of betrayal's aftershocks that still hung in the air like the smoke from a dying pyre. The hall itself was a cavernous expanse within Blackwood Keep, its vaulted ceiling lost in shadows where iron chandeliers dangled like the claws of some primordial beast, their flames sputtering in the drafts that whispered through arrow-slit windows, carrying the crisp, metallic scent of impending snow from the peaks outside. The gathered pack filled the space with their collective presence, furred bodies shifting restlessly on the flagstone floor, breaths fogging in rhythmic clouds, and the low, rumbling undercurrent of murmurs that built like a gathering storm, each voice laced with the weight of traditions, clashing against the unforeseen. With Kai's voice tentatively restored, emerging in halting phrases that carried the fragile timbre of a river breaking free from winter's unyielding ice, his words often trailing into pauses heavy with the echo of years silenced. The Pax Tribunal convened in this hallowed arena, the air humming with the low, resonant rumble of assembled wolves and the faint, sacred scent of burning sage offered to the moon goddess in brass censers that swung gently from chains. The ritual smoke curled upward in lazy spirals, mingling with the earthy musk of pelts and the subtle tang of herbal salves still clinging to the wounds from the recent fray. Whispers of Ilara's human origins clashed like relentless storm waves against the jagged rocks of irrefutable evidence. The locket's radiant light had unraveled the advisor's insidious web, charting hidden paths through deception's treacherous snare and preserving the throne from utter collapse, its silver crescent now a focal point of awe and suspicion as it gleamed against her simple tunic. Pack members leaned forward, eyes narrowed, some with the feral gleam of inherited prejudice, others with the softening gaze of those who had glimpsed salvation in her visions, debating her place among them in voices that rose and fell like the wind through the pines. Thorn, his flank wound bound tightly in layers of linen soaked in salves that reeked of pungent herbs and moonlight-infused oils gathered under the last full moon, paced the hall's length with the measured gait of a predator caged by his own conscience. The injury throbbed with each step, a persistent fire that mirrored the internal blaze of his turmoil, his massive frame casting long shadows that seemed to war with the light. He grappled with the dual chains of his exalted role, bound by ancient pacts forged in blood and moonlight to unite with a pure-blood Omega from one of the allied border pacts, a union meant to secure fragile borders against the ever-encroaching Ironfang and mend the fractures in Eldridge's alliances through shared lineage and untainted heirs. Yet inexorably, he felt drawn to this unassuming redeemer, Ilara, whose quiet empathy had breached the impenetrable fortress of his guarded heart, her presence a balm that soothed the guilt-ridden scars left by Elowin's loss. In stolen moments by the hearth, their eyes would meet across the flames, a silent current passing between them, his amber depths reflecting a longing for redemption, hers holding a wary flicker of possibility, tempered by the fear of further rejection. Dilemmas swirled through the assembly like mischievous snow devils whipped by an unseen gale across the open moors, each voice adding inexorable weight to the scales of judgment, pulling the pack toward division or unity. Kai, his words gaining strength with each utterance, though still laced with the raw edge of disuse, advocated fiercely for Ilara from his place at Thorn's side, his small hands gesturing emphatically as he recounted in vivid, boyish detail the visions that had saved them all, the locket's glow revealing ambushes before they struck, paths through the blizzard that led to safety. She saw what no one else could, he insisted, his voice cracking but resolute, drawing nods from the younger wolves who had fought beside him, their fur still flecked with dried blood. Ilara, standing resolute amid the encircling scrutiny, her posture straight, despite the invisible weight pressing down, wrestled her own tempests within. The budding tenderness toward Thorn and his son tempted her like a siren's haunting call from the mist-shrouded cliffs, a warmth that bloomed in her chest during quiet evenings when Kai practiced his letters by her side, or Thorn lingered to discuss the pack's lore. Yet she rationalized it fiercely as mere gratitude born of shared peril, not the inexorable pull of destiny woven by the goddess's hand, fearing that to yield would invite a deeper wound than exile ever could. Nightly, in the solitude of her assigned chambers, a sparse room with walls of rough-hewn stone draped in wolf pelts and a narrow window framing the starlit peaks, the moon goddess's emblems haunted her dreams, vivid tableau that left her waking with sweat-dampened skin and a racing heart. The locket warmed against her chest with prophetic glimpses, entwined fates where she stood beside Thorn under a blood moon, their hands joined as the pack howled in acceptance, or solitary wanderings through endless forests where freedom's wild call drowned out the ache of belonging. The visions carried the chill of truth, forcing her to question the essence of strength. What was it, if not the courage to choose vulnerability over the safety of isolation, mercy over the armor of self-preservation? The trial reached its zenith in the lunar temple adjoining the keep, a sanctum of polished marble veined with shimmering silver that pulsed faintly in the moonlight. Its domed roof open to the star-pricked sky where constellations wheeled like the goddess's own tapestry. The air here vibrated with profound spiritual resonance, thick with the scent of beeswax candles and the faint floral incense of night-blooming lunar roses, accompanied by the soft, ethereal chime of wind bells suspended from the arches, tinkling like distant laughter in the breeze. Pack elders and warriors gathered in a solemn circle, their shadows merging with the frost-kissed floors as Ilara stepped into the center, the locket catching the moon's direct rays and casting prismatic light across the assembly. Under the goddess's unblinking gaze, which seemed to pierce the veil between worlds, Ilara confronted the heart's unforgiving crossroads. To claim the love that promised to heal the king's fractured lineage and her own exiled spirit, braving the pack's entrenched wrath, the erasure of her hard-won independence, and the risk of becoming just another pawn in alpha politics. Or to retreat into freedom's enigmatic embrace, the wilds calling with the allure of uncharted solitude, where no bonds could bind or break her. Thorn, positioned at the altar's edge, paced the temple's frost-kissed floors with growing agitation. His internal war laid bare in the tension of his jaw and the furrow of his brow. Power's seductive throne, with its promises of stability and legacy, versus compassion's redemptive light, which whispered of true sovereignty born from forgiveness. In the hearth's contemplative crackle, where a sacred fire burned with logs of ancient yew, the ethical maelstrom reached its zenith, forcing a reckoning that could either forge unbreakable unity or rend the pack asunder in a cascade of old grudges. Faith clashed with despair in every heartbeat, each step echoing the profound, timeless query: could mercy truly forge a crown from the ashes of rejection, or would it crumble under the weight of inherited sins? In the temple garden's shadowed heart, a solitary rosebush endured the winter's merciless siege, its thorns glistening with rime and petals suspended in crystalline bloom like frozen tears wept by the moon herself, standing as an eternal, unyielding vigil over the unspoken verdicts that shaped destinies in the unrelenting cold, its roots delving deep into soil that remembered the blood of ancient rites. As the season's grip tightened into an unyielding vice, blanketing the lands in deeper shrouds of snow that muffled all but the insistent drum of hearts and the occasional snap of overburdened branches, the Iron Fang launched their reprisal with the fury of a long-buried grudge erupting from the earth, a ferocious onslaught that erupted from the shadowed flanks of the mountains like a living blizzard, a maelstrom of slashing claws, thunderous roars, and the metallic clash of improvised weapons, forged from scavenged iron. The assault targeted the throne's perceived frailty with surgical precision, scouts slipping through the wards under cover of a howling gale, their howls blending with the wind to sow chaos before the main force struck at dawn. The air filled with the sharp crack of breaking ice and the acrid smoke of signal flares launched skyward, painting the horizon in streaks of orange against the pale gray sky. Ilara's Pathfinder endowment flared like a celestial flare amid the turmoil, its visions cascading through her mind in rapid, disorienting bursts. Flashes of enemy flanks hidden in ravines, the glint of hidden blades in the underbrush, directing Thorn's defenders through lethal ambuscades with unerring precision, her voice cutting through the din as she shouted coordinates and warnings. The locket served as a steadfast beacon, slicing through the nocturnal pall, its silver surface pulsing with an inner light that reflected off the polished armor of the Blackwood warriors and the wide, determined eyes of Kai, who now moved with the grace of one reborn, his earlier fragility shed like winter's skin. Kai battled fiercely at her side, no longer the silent shadow but a whirlwind of youthful vigor, his voice a clarion of warnings that cut through the cacophony of snarls and screams. To the left, through the gap, his small frame dodging lunges with an agility honed in the cave's trials. A curved dagger gripped tightly in his hand, its blade nicked from parrying blows. The bond between them thrummed like a live wire, his loyalty to Ilara a blazing torch illuminating the darkness of his inherited duty, each shared glance a reaffirmation of the trust forged in exile. Thorn led the vanguard, his massive form a bulwark against the tide. Claws extended and fangs bared as he cleaved through ranks of iron fang betas. The snow churned to bloody slush under his paws, his roars a primal symphony that rallied the pack even as fatigue clawed at his healing wound. The conflict's nexus pulsed in a ravaged glade, ringed by sentinel evergreens whose branches drooped heavy with snow, the ground a churned morass of white and red where the air thickened with the coppery reek of blood, the earthy musk of exertion, and the sharp, resinous sting of pine sap from splintered boughs that littered the earth like fallen soldiers. Here, Thorn squared off against the Iron Fang Alpha, a colossal brute whose scarred hide told visceral tales of unquenched ambition and brutal campaigns, his pelt a patchwork of old wounds mended with crude stitches, his eyes burning with a fanatic gleam that mirrored Thorn's own youthful sins of unchecked dominance and ruthless conquests. The two alphas circled each other in a tense ballet of power, breaths heaving in visible plumes, the snow compressing under their weight with soft crunches that belied the violence to come. "Your mercy weakens you, Blackwood," the rival snarled, his voice a guttural rumble like grinding stones, lunging with a swipe that Thorn parried, the impact reverberating through the glade and sending a spray of frost into the air. Blood arced through the frigid atmosphere in vivid arcing sprays, staining the virginal snow a profound scarlet that steamed faintly in the cold, the metallic reek overwhelming as it mingled with the guttural cries of the wounded and the relentless patter of snow dislodged from the trees. In the tumult's swirling vortex, where shadows twisted like living entities under the intermittent cloud cover, Ilara found herself isolated amid the fray, her pathfinder sight flickering under the strain as a trio of snarling betas cornered her against a jagged outcrop, their eyes burning with lethal intent, fangs dripping with saliva and the promise of a swift end. Her life hung as the bargaining chip for the king's momentary paralysis, the locket hot against her skin as she backed away, heart pounding a frantic rhythm, her mind racing through visions of escape routes now blocked by the melee. Thorn's resolve crystallized in that harrowing instant, his gaze locking onto her peril across the chaos. With a bellow that shook the evergreens, he disarmed the rival Alpha not with killing blows that would perpetuate the cycle of vengeance, but with a measured, powerful strike that felled the brute without fatality, a precise cuff to the jaw that sent him sprawling into the snow, dazed but alive. Extending an accord of alliance over the abyss of slaughter, Thorn's voice boomed, "Enough blood for one winter, join us or fade into the wilds." The tide turned decisively, the Iron Fang wavering under the unexpected blade of clemency, their ranks fracturing as some lowered weapons, whispers of doubt rippling through their lines like cracks in thin ice. But victory's price escalated mercilessly in the aftermath. A glancing claw from a retreating beta raked across Thorn's shoulder, reopening his old wound and sapping his strength in a rush of hot blood that soaked his fur. He staggered forward through the thinning fight, collapsing at Ilara's feet in a heap of labored breaths, fur matted and eyes dimming with pain, whispering litanies of regret for the years squandered in guilt's suffocating thrall. "I failed you both, but no more." She knelt in the crimson slush, heedless of the cold seeping through her knees, pressing the locket to his heaving chest with trembling hands, its warmth seeping through fur and flesh like a lifeline as her tears traced warm, salty paths down her chilled cheeks, melting the frost that had long encrusted their worlds and blurring the line between despair and hope. In that intimate collapse of barriers, love, so long resisted, dissected through reason's cold lens, and rationalized as fleeting illusion, now compelled unyielding acceptance, not as a bestowed prize or easy reward, but as the ultimate ordeal that would catalyze their collective rebirth, transmuting the raw pain of isolation into an unbreakable alloy forged in the fires of choice. The moon emerged from the clouds then, casting a silvery benediction over the glade, as if the goddess herself approved the mercy that bound them, whispering that true power lay not in conquest, but in the grace to heal what was broken. Under the full moon's compassionate vigil, which hung low and luminous in the velvet sky like a watchful eye woven from threads of silver and shadow, The locket's crescent gleamed with the luster of a vow inscribed in starfire, weaving the frayed threads of old wounds into a tapestry of enduring wholeness that shimmered with the promise of futures reclaimed. The denouement ushered in a profound renascimento, rippling through the pack like dawn's first tentative light cresting the jagged peaks, chasing away the long night of suspicion and strife with a gentle, inexorable glow. In the days following the battle, as the snow began its slow melt into rivulets that sang through the valleys, Thorn, invigorated by Ilara's restorative touch, which channeled the locket's latent energy into a healing warmth that knit flesh and soothed the spirit's deeper fractures, dismantled the archaic hierarchies that had festered like untreated sores within the pack's heart. He gathered the elders in the great hall once more, his voice steady and resonant as he decreed reforms, borders redrawn not by bloodlines but by bonds of loyalty, humans and wolves alike welcomed as equals under the moon's impartial gaze, and alliances forged through shared purpose rather than coerced unions. The air buzzed with murmurs of astonishment, the scent of fresh pine boughs laid as offerings mingling with the lingering herbal notes of celebration, as Thorn embraced Ilara publicly as his consort, not for the hollow gains of power, political leverage, or the propagation of untainted heirs, but for the profound compassion that had sutured the fissures in his tormented soul. Her presence, a living testament to redemption's quiet power. Kai's speech flowed with burgeoning confidence, each sentence emerging smoother and more assured, a monument to the silence shattered by improbable benevolence and the human teacher's whispered word that had unlocked his voice. Mother, in the heat of crisis. No longer the haunted boy of exile, he roamed the keep's halls with a lightness that drew smiles from even the sternest warriors, his laughter, a rare, bell-like sound that echoed like spring's first thaw, filling the stone corridors as he bridged the worlds of human insight and lupine instinct. Evenings found him at Ilara's side in the schoolhouse, now restored and bustling, practicing runes with a fervor that spoke of reclaimed joy, his small hand occasionally brushing the locket in quiet gratitude, its crescent a shared emblem of the journey that had mended him. The humbled Iron Fang, their aggression quelled by the unexpected blade of clemency that had spared their alpha and offered olive branches amid the snow, ratified a tentative peace in a moonlit council at the border stones, ancient monoliths etched with truce runes where the air hummed with wary optimism and the distant howls of both packs merged for the first time in generations, a harmonious chorus that resonated across the valleys like a hymn to unity under the shared lunar canopy. Scouts reported no further incursions, and trade routes reopened, carrying not just goods, but stories of the Blackwood King's mercy, which rippled outward like stones skipped across a frozen lake, thawing old enmities. Yet the essence of their choices endured as a hallowed pyre, demanding ongoing vigilance and sacrifice. Ilara relinquished the veil of her human obscurity for this woven destiny, trading the solitary freedom of the wilds for the complexities of pack life, her pathfinder light, now a gift openly revered, curing the king's entrenched guilt through love's rigorous validation, a proof forged in the crucible of mutual vulnerability and ethical trials. In quiet moments, as they walked the temple paths, hand in hand, she felt the locket's pulse sync with Thorn's heartbeat, a reminder that redemption was no singular event, but a daily choosing, where compassion triumphed over power's allure. Kai, too, bore the marks of growth, his voice a bridge that healed familial rifts, turning the pain of loss into a foundation for strength. In the lunar temple's sanctified quiet, as soft snowflakes drifted like blessings from the heavens, carried on a gentle zephyr that stirred the wind bells to a soft melody, they converged as an unbreakable triad, Alpha, Omega, Air. Bathed in the moon's radiant affirmation, the marble floors cool beneath their feet and the air alive with the subtle fragrance of thawing earth. Thorn drew Ilara close, his breath warm against her ear as he murmured vows of partnership, while Kai stood between them, eyes shining with unshadowed pride. The locket, now a communal emblem passed between them in ritual moments, encapsulated their odyssey. Rejection alchemized into unyielding strength through trials endured, despair transfigured into unshakable faith by choices embraced. What, in the grand weave of existence under the goddess's eternal watch, was redemption, if not the deliberate choice to entwine souls amid the unrelenting storm, kindling an enduring light from the profoundest dark, ensuring that every wound became a scar of beauty? If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe, because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive.